Welcome everybody. Welcome to our PropTech Connect with our panelists here to talk about tenant experience. Today we have Jacqueline from Boelens, who manages workspace there. We have June, who's a partner of Total Workspace at Cushman Wakefield. Tyler, head of global channel partnerships at HQO, and Lukas, founder and CEO of Spaceflow. I'll give you guys each a brief minute to introduce yourselves. Jacqueline, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline. I work at Boelens Gruyter, based in Amsterdam. And I'm a manager commercial real estate. So I'm working a lot with tenants and what they need and what we should develop for them. Yeah, that's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Vermette. I'm the head of global partnerships for HQO. I've been here about 3 years, had an exciting opportunity to build the direct landlord business across North America, and now working globally with our partners like JLL, Cushman Wakefield, and a variety of other technology folks that touch our platform. So it's been a really good journey, and we've learned a lot along the way, and excited to be part of this. So thank you for having me.
Great. Lukas?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lukas Balik, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Spaceflow. So we provide an all-in-one tenant-facing operating system for commercial, but also residential real estate. I'm currently based in Prague, Czech Republic, and yeah, we are working with many exciting landlords and clients, building operators all over 18 markets at the moment. So we're looking forward to having a nice discussion today with all of you guys.
Great. And June?
Hi, I'm June. I'm a partner in Cushman Wakefield's Total Workplace team. I'm a workplace strategist by trade. So, over the last decade, working with occupiers and organizations to really help to think about what their business and goals and their business strategy looks like, translated into their building and workplace strategy.
Great. Thank you guys very much. So why don't we start with a baseline, just going around in the circle, kind of talking about what are your tenants asking for now, or kind of what are you hearing from the market? What are the kind of the must-haves, and which are some new features and new amenities that people are looking for? Lukas, why don't we start with you?
So maybe I would divide it into two categories. Like number one is the growing demand for better utilization of the space and the productivity, right? This is more a link to the office environment, but not just the office, because we see that actually the asset types are blending. Like, our living and working experiences are more connected than ever before, but definitely the features that help help tenants to boost the productivity and better utilization of the space are in high demand. These features can be anything like booking of spaces, access to the building, or to the meeting rooms, visitor management. This is just for give you an idea. Second bigger topic I would say is the need for having healthy environments and the sustainability, right? People or end users really demand environments that are safe, that are again helping them to be productive, with air, fresh air, and also they are much more sensitive on the other sustainable topics like carbon neutrality and so on. Now, and here I can name, of course, like the smart metering features, for example, where you can in the app directly see like the levels of the air quality or temperature or CO2, but also, for example, of course, the wellness programs that helps our clients to provide the best experiences for their end users.
Why don't we go to you next? What are you hearing from your tenants at Cushman?
I think we can kind of broadly look at it as like two broad categories, right? Like I think the reality is that for a lot of occupiers and a lot of us, and if you look at it at a global scale, we're either just about to come out of lockdown and restrictions, or we're for some countries in Europe, they're still in the midst of restrictions. And when you start to look at the immediate concerns and priorities, really for occupiers, it's how do we use experience apps or platforms to help people come back to the office kind of like safely? How do we make sure that like we use and leverage on experience apps to make sure that when they do come back in the office, functionality is at like, tip top shape, right? You get into the rooms that you need to, you plug in the things that you need to. But I think that this is very much shaped by the fact that we're still kind of like, not very much out of it yet. And as much as like, you hear everybody talking about hybrid working and it's like overkill, the reality is that like, we've had like, 2 years experience of pretty much working remotely with restrictions. We don't actually have a lot of experience yet truly working hybrid. And as we kind of transition to that, what you're going to start to see is that occupiers and organizations would soon demand that whatever experience apps or platforms are created, it has to traverse office buildings, co-working spaces, homes, and like a much wider ecosystem of places. It can't just be solely like, narrowed to like the building that your office is in, because that's just not, in alignment with where hybrid working is going and where the future is working. So you're going to start to see the shift. But I think for a lot of companies, that's not the immediate priority for now.
Jacqueline, how about you? Is it similar thoughts to June?
Yeah, no, totally agree with June and her experience in this. What I noticed when I listen to occupiers visiting our buildings and what they need, they struggle a little now as well during coming out of COVID. They would like to create a place whereby people can meet each other and the company culture can function in the best way. And that is broader than only building specific. That is you need the right facilities within your building, but you need the right apps and functionalities to make sure that the office will be a place, to have the best experience for your people.
How about you, Tyler? HQO as one of the big tenant experience apps in the office space now. What are you hearing?
Yeah, so I think everyone had a lot of really good points. They touched on a lot of key areas, and I would boil it down. I actually took a look at our digital grid and all our data and analytics on the back end. And a lot of what we've seen is food and beverage and retail remain key components to that everyday experience that people have, wanting to get food ordered to the suite level, wanting to have discounts, and really connecting down to the neighborhood level. So there's a lot of specificity that those tenants want and those employees want as they come back to that office. And then I think communications in real time is huge. So, who's going to be in the office, what desks are available. So that digs a bit of the functionality that the apps provide. And then for the tenant, obviously the employer, they get that data back and then they can make some different optimizations on their strategy. And I think resource booking as well is a really big one that is exciting, and we'll get into Flex a little bit more later. So that's what we're seeing on our side.
One quick point, what we notice is mobility is one addition, which is pretty a hot topic in Amsterdam due to the fact that we bike, of course, a lot, but the Muni would like to push down on cars, and that is what Lukas mentioned as well on CO2, etc. So that is something, connectivity and mobility is something we should think about in regards to an office building as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Why don't we have a live Ask the Audience? So I think the audience members and panelists should be able to see a poll now. Obviously, these aren't all the features in Office, but you can answer live and see kind of what are the main reasons you yourself personally would want to come back to the office and what features are most interesting. Give everybody about 30 more seconds. All right, and we'll end the poll in about 2 seconds. So last answer is coming in. Great, so I think everybody can see the results on there. So I think good to see that free food isn't the main factor bringing people in. And at the end of the day, it's still kind of the top tier work setup and making sure people are comfortable working in their office and probably still have advantages over a home office. Now going back to the panelists, maybe a question then, is it going to become a kind of amenities war? I think obviously Google and other tech players are quite famous for, splashing out in the offices, free massages, nap pods, all of these great perks. But at the end of the day, is it going to become amenities war? Or kind of what can people do to really stand out? June, why don't we start with you and Cushman?
I think yes, it is, amenities are going to be important, but I think what is more critical than just thinking about what you can put in your building and what the landlord actually provides is think about like the wider surrounding neighborhoods and ecosystem, right? Like, like it's the same thing. Like, why would you have to, spend all that money running, maintaining, and operating like your own, like, coffee bar if like, you're in Shoreditch, sorry for the London reference, but if you're in Shoreditch and like Grindr's right there, why would you have to do that? And, is it more about like moving to an ecosystem where it's about creating partnerships with all of the small businesses or just the businesses around you to provide that level of amenities for your employees? And this is an important point because as we are starting to talk a lot more about ESG, as an industry, the E part of the ESG is pretty much nailed down, right? Like we have like tons of metrics, we know we want to measure. All of this stuff is being like, far much more developed than the S part of ESG. And when you start to think about like the role of workplaces, the role of offices built and just like, occupiers and organizations, there's a real opportunity to think about the role of your office building as like, like how does it generate like, just secondary, economics around where you kind of like choose to locate your building. So amenities, yes, but I would say that like, it's definitely going to be a much more, how do you say, like diverse and a way of like just like amassing those amenities than just putting things in your building.
Tyler, I think you talked a little bit about this, about tying it back to the community. Is that kind of what HQ is looking to do, making sure that everybody has a cohesive employee experience, but obviously the London office should have a different experiences versus say the New York office?
Yeah, I mean, we're focused on driveway to desk. So how do you, as Jacqueline mentioned, mobility, getting to the office, how do you get in? How do you move from the tenant to the employee experience? And I think if we think of the different regions and different demands that we all have, obviously being in Amsterdam is very different than being in Boston. Being in London is different than being in Los Angeles. So I think in the infancy of the space, we thought a lot about the more national levels, North America, Europe. Now we're really boiling down into what those specific geographies are. And then those specific experiences. And also, I mean, as everyone here can attest, there's a lot of different partners who provide different experiences in different locations. So I think those are all extremely important. And if we think about, amenities, we actually had one of the head site managers and experienced people from Cambridge campus for Google in the office yesterday for a sales kickoff, which is exciting to hear about, where they're going, what they're doing as one of the top companies in the world. And he noted that everyone's catching up on amenities, all tech companies, other different institutions. So, the direct feedback loop through data and that connection to the end user is extremely important in order to be able to start to understand what those employees want. Because we can always make assumptions and guesses, and so can the heads of workplace, but how do we actually define what their needs are? So that's in the office and outside the office.
Absolutely. And Lukas, is your data showing similar themes as well?
Absolutely. We see that the need for a high amount of amenities all over residential and office assets is growing. Like, we perceive that at the end, like all these asset types are somehow being like hotelized, with similar experience like you would get in a hotel, something you now expect from the office or from the living experience. And I think what is interesting here is that many landlords have the opportunity to also build their own brands around this, right? Like, it doesn't need to be only that you are actually working with third-party vendors or marketplaces or partners from nearby, but it's actually a great opportunity for landlords to establish a brand on top of that with their own amenities that they, for example, provide through the technology as well, but also on site. And it's a part of their experience why people actually like their buildings, because it's a love brand, and that's why people want to spend their dimes. And I think this is the future. The landlords will get much more involved also in the service operations.
Jacqueline, anything to add?
No, not much. What we think is very important is opening up office buildings or other asset classes. So at least make sure that the ground floors are public accessible for the neighborhood as well. And amenities, of course, and I think everyone mentioned are key for literally every tenant, and make sure that you have that interaction between the tenants and between your location itself.
And just Thinking about that, like how do people align what the end user wants and what your tenant? So often the company obviously is the tenant signing the lease. Obviously the end users are the employees. How do you balance the needs of both, and are the needs always aligned? Maybe Tyler, if we started off with you.
Yeah, I think from a top level, employees want to like where they work, and employers want them to like where they work because their biggest focus is on retention and obviously keeping that talent and then sourcing new talent. So I think if that's the goal, in where we're at now in kind of our journey as the world and going through this pandemic, we have to really, and the employers have to define what that flexibility looks like. And that really comes down to a company level, as we're seeing in our own companies and across the news. So how do we start to enable what that looks like as we come back to the office? And I think a lot of that can be gathered through data and through understanding in real time, both through survey-based methodology, tenant satisfaction scores, as well as other types of different amenities that people are using, and then obviously trying to make assumptions based off of those models.
And Jacqueline, are you guys doing anything to encourage people to come back to the office? Is there anything that's particularly working, or any investments people are making into their offices to bring workers back?
Not specifically, but what you see is that people would like to go back to the office and are really focused on creating a workplace whereby meeting and having a healthy workplace is key. So we try to provide office spaces whereby people would like to come back and make sure that they can meet other people as well. And at least be out of the office, because I think the impact of COVID working at home, and it all sounds very, very nice, but some people just don't have the space at home. So yeah, coming back to the office is really key. But security is one major important part as well. So air quality, etc. Those are points we are currently focusing on to make sure that health and well-being within a building is optimal.
June, how about at Cushman? Are people coming to you and asking you to be a thought partner on how to improve their office spaces? And kind of what are the people looking at?
I think it's like, this is where the thing is that like there's no like straight up answer for this, right? Because one of the things, and I think Tyler started to allude to this, is that it's very much dependent on the culture of the organization. There are organizations that we've worked with that are on extremes. So organizations who, literally like draw up schedules for when they think people should come in. So, it's just like team A come in on Mondays and Tuesday, team B, and they go to that extent to kind of just like, mandate that people come in on certain days. And you have like organizations who are like, this is cool. Like, we don't know what's happening. So we'll not even like provide guidance and we'll see what happens. I think like, again, one of the things that people constantly, or like, clients constantly talk about worrying are a few things, right? I mean, like most obviously is that they worry about productivity. So are people still performing at a level that they are, today compared to when they are in the office 5 days a week? Are people feeling connected to the culture of the office and, with colleagues outside of their teams? And then the third thing companies are really worried about is like, are people learning? So not, and we're not talking about formal structured, like, large training sessions, but are people learning? And especially when you start to think about like, consulting firms or like, legal firms, learning by osmosis becomes like an incredibly important thing that has been missing in the last 2 years. And so for organizations who have a lot more skin in the game when it comes to these three categories, you can almost like see that like, they're kind of like veering towards trying to, their strategies about how do we get people to come back to the office. And for organizations who, look across, like, and to Tyler's point, like, I think data is incredibly important, not just like workplace data, but like, your business performance data, and where they've seen like absolutely no dent to say things like, billable hours or like revenue. That's when you start to see like a much more openness from leadership to really embrace like a completely different model of working.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely heard from friends in consulting saying, obviously for more senior people, it makes no difference in terms of their learning, but for a lot of the very junior staff, people coming straight out of university, that on-the-job training is so important, and they're definitely missing that. So they basically lost 2 years of learning. So obviously moving upwards, that analyst class isn't as strong. And I think we definitely see this even in tech as well, with Google kind of doubling down on their offices, buying up the real estate that they were leasing in London, or even, for example, I know anecdotally, moving from the Bay Area down to San Diego, Google implemented a 15% pay cut while Facebook only implemented 5%. So they're really incentivizing monetarily for their employees to come back to the office. Lukas, is that kind of what you're seeing from the startup side as well?
Absolutely. I fully agree with what June, Tyler has mentioned, but also at the same time, it's really, really individual. Like we have, for example, at Spaceflow, we have implemented team days, where we are basically bringing teams of various teams, like on different days in a week, and that works quite well for us. But also at the same time, we really understand that this is still being shaped, and it's part of the culture of each company, of how they want to perceive this. Because, for example, in IT, the full remote is something that is pretty common for specific roles, while, for example, we see that for the customer success team or the sales guys, it's much more that they are really loving the collaboration in the office, and they come almost every day. But yeah, every team is different, at least how I see, for example, at Spaceflow. And what we do directly to help our clients and landlords and customers, we also work a lot with surveys and polls, to really bridge the gap between landlord and the end user. So again, through data, they can learn much more about the new perceptions or expectations from the environment. We have a team of community managers or customer success managers who help our clients to get these inputs or feedback loops. And I think that's the way to really go individually for needs and cases for the company, because every company is different.
And then Lukas, just staying with you, obviously Jacqueline, Tyler, and June all represent office and workspace. But Spaceflow also does residential as well. Are you hearing the same things in the residential side from tenants? And is there any major differences between office and residential?
So we believe, and what we see from the data and big research that we have done, that the residential or rental living is really booming. It's of course because the all the uncertainty about the office, and we really need to repurpose office in many ways to make them fit our current world. So therefore, we also work with the residential, and we know that majority of global landlords, they have mixed portfolios, combined portfolios of residential and office. And what we see that actually the amenities or the expectations for these places are really blending together. So when you're, for example, in the modern residential concept, you already have like places like conference rooms there or meeting rooms that you can book. So it really bridges the gap, between work life and your personal life, and same vice versa in the office. You have much more focus on the experiences that are, of course, like boosting your productivity, but at the same time feel in a collaborative environment with the community, like you would like to have also where you're living. So the concrete amenities, of course, can differ. In residential, we have a lot like room cleaning, a lot of like tennis courts you can book, or these common areas. In office, it's more, of course, about the parking and catering, meeting rooms. So these are the concrete examples of, for example, the amenities.
Okay. Pivoting a little bit, I think we already touched on this with a little bit mentioned before, but obviously ESG is a very hot topic, but I think now there's a lot of pressure from investors, from everybody, from employees themselves. ESG is really becoming a top of the mind situation when you're choosing office space. So Tyler, maybe starting with you, kind of what are the key ESG features you can put in? I think people mentioned, smart metering, things like that. Kind of what are the features tenants are looking for in terms of ESG, and then how are they using this data to make their own decisions from there.
Sorry, I'm muted. I think if we think about ESG holistically, I mean, it makes a lot of sense why it's such an important topic right now. It's tied into tenant experience, and so many corporations have their own social policies. So if they define that culture and how they attract talent, they want to be in a building and in a space that supports and reflects those initiatives as well. So if we can highlight those things in the platform, I think that's really important. So you mentioned around energy, we have a variety of initiatives where we have the beehives on the roofs. So we utilize that functionality through like retail of the honey that they produce, and really diving more into, how buildings are becoming more green and what we're doing in those capacities to really help show that to the tenant side and the employee side, so they feel like they're tied into an initiative themselves as they're coming to work. So I think those are all important areas where one pane of glass can essentially bring that to life. As opposed to just hearing we're doing good sustainability initiatives as a company, they can actually see those things in real time.
If I may, like here, just like on the technology side, I think this is an opportunity for landlords to really empower, with these carbon net zero goals that now being introduced by the many landlords, many global landlords out there, is to really, like Tyler said, democratize these data and also show them through the platform. So potentially you can gamify tenants to also help you to achieve it. So you can send some weekly wrap up of the energy consumed, water consumption, how the CO2 levels are decreasing, and this is something where we really want to really focus on with the product development and support landlords to really empower these data, with these data, also the end users, tenants, and bridge the gap there.
Can you expand a little bit on how you're empowering them? So what kind of data are you sharing, or what data are you hearing that people are asking for?
Right.
And then do you help them make decisions from that, or basically how are they implementing this after they have this data?
So being specific or concrete data for air quality in the building, for CO2 levels, energy consumption, potentially water consumption, and waste management. These are some we kind of have experience with or want to also track, and we are working with partners that we can plug these data from their systems to show it easily in the platform, in the app for end users. So the first step is really just showing these data, and then the next is more about like controlling it and potentially like automating it based on the behavior of these people in the building, how they're using the space, and making the building smart enough so you really don't need to do even anything, but the building figures out to meet these goals.
It's also about making it fun. So we have an engagement team along with our customer success team. So they come up with ideas like recycling competitions. So starting to get things that are, tenant involved, which I think we all can get behind some of that stuff, and it becomes more of a fun factor as opposed to just seeing our air quality, which I do appreciate a clean space with air, but it's also part of that experience factor, if you will, which is kind of the foundation of the platforms.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tyler, you touched on something that's really key. It's how do you make ESG part of the experience for the end user? So I think you showed a really good example now. Is there anything else you guys do to kind of really engage with employees and not just the companies and the tenants?
Specifically from an ESG perspective, those are the examples that I have, or kind of like the beehives going up and being part of that experience and doing the recycling components. But I think anything can really become part of that initiative, and you can tie that also into social good as well, which we've done a lot of, and then combining some of that employee kind of teamwork into some of those ESG initiatives as well. So those can be different events that we've had throughout the neighborhood and those different communities that I've talked about before as well.
Can I just add that I think one of the points that Jacqueline made early on is actually a really important part about like the social part of ESG, which is like really thinking about how you're opening up the ground floor at the bare minimum. And here's the thing, right? Like, it's not a new concept opening up your ground floors, but a lot of organizations have not really done that because of security issues or whatever, right? So you have banks, you have oil and gas companies, you have like tech companies, and a lot of these companies, like because of dealing with security and like confidentiality, typically like shy away from just like completely opening up the ground floor. And that, that alone is like, a huge knot, I think, to like the starting of the journey about how you would actually interact with the community around you for the social good. And, coming back to this whole thing again, like, just using a UK statistic, like, of the working force in this country, less than half of the working force in this country actually work in jobs in offices. So, coming back to that again, like if you think about an office block or like an office building in a city, yes, you can, you can do a lot of ESG good with the tenants of the building. But when you start to expand that, and again, like, platforms like, experience platforms like we're talking about, that they're the perfect way. There's like a very low entry barrier. It's about like, giving access to different people, to the great things that are happening in your building and the population within the building, via an app or like an experience platform that others can tap into. And I think this is something that, organizations are piloting, they are trying it out. But I think that like, that would be one of the most obvious ways to kind of like really do like social good with like office buildings and workplaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a really good point. Often with ESG, we focus so much on the carbon aspect, but the social good portion is actually very important here as well. Jacqueline, how about you?
No, totally agree, and I think that the point mentioned by June is very valid and very good. I think it is basic nowadays to show how sustainable a building is, and to make sure that it is as healthy as possible, looking at air quality. And Tyler and Lukas are far more experienced in that, on how to show that to the public. But I think it is something that is a basic. We shouldn't even say, okay, that is amazing that you have such a sustainable building. Every building should be very sustainable. And I think the focus going forward for the coming years will be the fact that you focus far more on health and well-being of the people working within the building. And that is, of course, a very social aspect of the building, whereby you need the amenities, you need the community, and make sure that you have the best place for people to come, and make sure that they're healthy and focused on the job, and that you provide a place where they can do that.
Absolutely. Great. Just to pivot the conversation then, there's been a lot of kind of discussions in the space. Obviously, we have Cushman and HQO on with the recent part acquisition in there. There's also this build, partner, or buy mentality. So obviously, Cushman HQO have their partnership, Lincoln and Equium, VTS bought out Lane, while obviously other people have partnered with tech companies or built their own capabilities. I was just wondering if you guys think that's kind of where this space is going in. Will every kind of large real estate player need their kind of tenant experience startup to connect with? Obviously, I'll let maybe Tyler or June start here since they have that partnership there.
Go ahead, June.
I was speaking to one of the developers recently, and she kind of said the concept of like frenemies is going to be like a big thing moving forward for our industry. And I think like, that's one of looking at, but the partnerships, yeah, I think they're definitely crucial, like going forward, right? And it's something that I think our industry was quite slow to adopt. If you kind of look around and like you look at the other industries, like it's not like, a new thing that you acquire, like, innovation through like other companies. And it's something that I think is long time coming. But I think if you also just look at like how complex, like when you start to think about like, the employee experience, like outside of like, and I use employee because it's not just about tenant experience. Like if you look at like companies who are trying to really like design and deliver like, outstanding employee experience, that's a very complex ask. And I don't think like if you were one company with that like, one specialism, you could actually deliver that, like, I think like genuinely.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think if I think about the partnerships we have with Cushman, so from our investors, we have a variety of different partners like Cushman, JLL. We have landlords who have invested once we work with them. I think the biggest benefit that we see is it's a great feedback loop to learn. So I always tell people we're a technology company trying to become a real estate company, whereas a lot of those companies are trying to become more focused on technology. So it's a good marriage in that workflow. And the acquisition piece is interesting. This is a hot space. I come from ad tech, and we had this consolidation back in like 2006 to 2010. So if you look at kind of what's going on, we've obviously acquired Office App to really expand our reach into the corporate occupier space even deeper than what we had prior. So we have a very focused hedgehog strategy on what we're going to do in that space, as I mentioned, from driveway to desk and office and corporate. And other companies are taking different stances. They're trying to spread a little bit deeper into other areas, into leasing and do different things that, as June mentioned, may be a challenge to do and touch in a way that it needs to be granular enough for the end user and the customer to feel like they're having some customization there.
What are the main kind of difficulties or things that you need to get through with this partnership? I think, again, Tyler, as you mentioned, a tech company going into real estate is difficult, but I think a real estate company become a tech company is much harder just because of different cultures, of innovation, et cetera. I mean, I think Cushman is quite on the cutting edge, obviously, investing in HQO, et cetera. But what are kind of the main hurdles you guys anticipate or have kind of already seen?
You've been working with real estate companies?
Yeah, absolutely.
Collaborate.
Of that partnership, trying to make things work, because I think you're coming from very different worlds, very different cultures, and very different ways of working. Understanding the key hurdles would be quite important.
Like I 100% agree that there has to be a close collaboration between the real estate company and the tech company. So a lot of dialogues. Also, the real estate companies need to also put a lot of trust in us, in the tech partners and the companies, that we also know what we are doing, for example, in terms of the user experience or the UI of the platform. That's where we always been like a bit, hesitant, or like me as a founder, I was always scared. Okay, so if we work that closely with just one particular company, how we can make this work for the rest of the market? Because we really wanted to from day one build a technology that the global market will leverage and it will make life in all these buildings easier for the end users. So for us, it's very, very important that our clients respect our UX UI principles. At the same time, we really appreciate the collaboration model and all the feedback loop that we have with them to really make the features and the whole platform strong. And we really listen a lot to them also for what things to put on the roadmap. We always make these alignments with all of our clients to really make sure that we are on a joint journey with them and we are heading towards the same goals and direction. So I think it doesn't matter if these companies are invested in you or if you really work in this collaborative, you still need to work very closely with them. And that's a key for a long-standing partnership.
Great. Why don't we flip this question in verse then, Jacqueline and June. What do you look for when a tech company comes to you or startup comes to you? What are the kind of main things you're looking for, or that you what metric are you scoring against?
Okay, I'm gonna dodge your question, and I'm gonna just say, I'm gonna draw from my experience at WeWork rather than Cushman. So one of the things that was really that you could see that was so obvious when I was WeWork was that it was essentially a real estate business, right? But there was a lot of colleagues that came up from the tech industry. And one of the biggest disconnect that you kind of see was that, tech is something that, you work in an iterative model, you work in an agile model, you change products, you can do beta testing, prototypes. And so that mindset is very, very agile, working with the product that you can easily adapt and change. I'm not saying that's easy, but you can do it. And you're kind of taking that mindset and you're kind of coming into, an industry when you're dealing with leases that are freaking long. You're dealing with buildings that take forever to build. You're talking about if I want to change 5 things in the design that's not been executed, I then have to have 100 other sheets of paper being approved, that's compliant, that's okay. I have to change planning permits. So I don't think it's so much the culture, because I think we're culture is like completely like depending on like which companies we're talking about. But I think like the tension comes, a lot of the tension comes from it just being two incredibly different organizations, one that is so agile and fast and adaptive, and one that is like, to be perfectly candid, and I mean, this is my industry, but it's pretty much very slow to transform. And it's not, it's not an incredibly easy product to change just on the fly. And we are trying, like, we are thinking about, how do we do design building and planning in a modular way, but I don't think that pace, the different pace of like how these two different industries have like met yet. And like, I'm hopeful that it will soon. But I think that's what for me, like, through observation experience causes the most tension.
Absolutely. Jacqueline, obviously, I know you're on the innovation team as well there. What are some of the key innovations you're looking for? And then kind of how do you merge these two things when they're coming from such different, backgrounds?
Yeah, sure. No, it's very difficult. I'm going to cut it into basically as well, because as a developer, we design buildings and we try to think ahead for a couple of years, and then it's always difficult to implement innovation within the building design, which is good enough in the next couple of years. So I think you need partnerships, and you need companies who think along the way during the design process. So that's what we try to do as a developer, making sure that we align the correct partners to think along with us, and make sure that backbone is good to, if the building is there, that you're able to implement whatever technology or tech or data-driven application within the building. Of course, it's difficult, because what is the correct innovation now, which will be good enough for the next 2-3 years? And I think the focus for us on office buildings is basically getting the basics still right. And that is basically making an office building whereby you have the correct backbone for tenants, because you cannot foresee what specific tenants would like to add as a tech application within their leased space. But at least make sure that they're able to implement literally whatever they come up with. And therefore we speak a lot with tenants as well, asking them, okay, what would you like to have? And an important thing is to avoid having like multiple apps for several functions within the building. You need to make sure that it is easy enough for literally everyone to have just a workplace whereby you can control the basics. And that is the focus for us during the design process.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyler, obviously HQO has been very successful in this by growing so quickly. How do you guys make it as frictionless as possible to implement HQO into a building?
Yeah, so I think it always starts out for us with understanding the business outcomes, whether it be the landlord or the corporate, and what they want to start to achieve with their end user. And then from there, once we understand what those goals are, we'll start to phase that out and understand what features and functionality needs to be included. And then we have both, obviously, a lot of native features and functionalities in our platform. And then we have a wide variety of integrations that sit across the different functional verticals, from access controls, resource booking, food and beverage. And we try to put together the best package for that end user, and what makes the most sense for them. For us, it's really moving toward scale and really understanding how we start to build out connected portfolios. So we have several portfolios across North America, a variety across EMEA, and how do we start to make that experience? So if I'm in one building in New York uptown and I'm heading downtown, how can I use the conference room downtown? How can I book a desk? So I suddenly become part of this community. And that's no different if I'm part of a corporation globally and I'm going to head over to London and I need a place to work before some of my meetings that day. Can I get in the office over there? So I think that's a true frictionless end-to-end experience, both at the landlord and the corporate level, that is really exciting, that we're all kind of driving towards enabling globally.
And I just have one more question. So audience, if you want to submit a question, this is your chance now while we go to my last question. So if you have anything, please feel free to submit it in the Q&A chat box. So my last question is kind of a free-ranging one for all of our panelists. Kind of, what do you think is next for tenant experience? You can take this question however you want, either in terms of features, in terms of big changes in the market, either from the real estate side or kind of from the startup side as well. So Lukas, why don't we start with you?
So number one thing, following what Tyler said, is adoption on portfolio level. Like this is something we experienced as well in the past 24 months. We see more and more partners, our customers are actually rolling out the technology all over portfolio. So they don't just have like one building or one pilot, but it's really part of their digital strategy. So that's the adoption overall across the market. Second, Jacqueline mentioned it already, but the thing that, more and more these platforms will be integrated, it will help us to control the actual building, and the features will get better with all the integrations. But at the same time, I think it's extremely important to ensure, again, like the simplicity of the platforms, making it easy for end users, because we can see that there are many apps and platforms providing a lot of features, but it's kind of hard to use it for the end users. And at Spaceflow, for us, always the UX and UI of the platform is the key, and we want to make it as easy as possible for end users to get the best out of their life in the building. And the first is the modularization. Like, you need to have a modular platform to be able to reflect individual needs across the portfolio of the building or the asset type. And that's where we believe that the technology needs to really get modular to make sure that the outcomes for the landlords are and the end users are the best as possible.
It's like I think like the next thing that would happen is definitely an expansion of like experience platforms to outside of the building. So whether it's connecting across portfolios, as like Tyler and Lukas mentioned, or just connecting to even like just other buildings in asset classes that an organization might own, and definitely I think it will definitely expand into the home office.
Great, Tyler.
Yeah, I touched on this a little before, but I think both the landlord and especially the partners, like we work with Cushman, and I think the experience piece. So we're seeing a lot of awesome programming, both the kids call it the phygital, the physical, and the digital now. So a lot of that's coming together and being activated by groups like June and other folks, even at the landlord level. And that's becoming a really important part. As Lukas mentioned, how we get people back and how we change that experience in that day to day, because I think about the office when I go to Boston, that's my hub. I do a lot of things out of that office. I meet friends for dinner. I go to a Red Sox game. I do a variety of different things. I think the biggest piece of this is how do we build one pane of glass to activate all the things that we're asking our tenants and our employees to do on a day-to-day basis and make it frictionless. And then through that, can we create enough FOMO to make people want to come back and really have that excitement about that experience that they get in their day-to-day life. So I think that's how I think about it. And then from a features and functionality standpoint, I think that the more we get ingrained with these partners and the more the partners start to really see the value of our platforms, they'll want to do more integrations and work with us as well. So it'll become a really good dual stream of connectivity.
Great, Jacqueline.
Yeah, I think data and experience, and I think everyone mentioned it already, it is a very important one to create kind of one platform, one shop stop, basically, whereby you have that combination as a tenant to make sure that you can book your shared car, so have mobility included, F&B, and have that flexibility if needed, if you need an additional meeting room or whatsoever, but make sure that that is getting easier. And that everyone will actually use it as well, where the ultimate goal is to create the best community in literally every building, not only for the office tenants or the occupiers, but also for the neighborhood, to make sure that everyone can be connected. And I think that is the focus going forward in regards to tenant experience.
We have a couple of questions from the audience. With 10 minutes left, we'll go in a kind of lightning round. So anybody who has an answer, feel free to just jump in. First question is, do you think the leading platforms acquire the point solution platforms like office booking, access, etc., so they own the whole UX? Any panelists want to take this one? I think it's basically the value chain. So yeah, Tyler, go ahead.
I'd say it depends on your platform approach, because we as a platform, I mentioned before, we have our native functionality. So we have really doubled down on resource booking and spent a lot of resources on increasing and enhancing our resource booking. So for people who want a lighter version of our platform, but they may be in a Class B asset, they get the same great experience that someone who's paying for a third party gets. But at the same time, we then integrate with a wide variety of third parties to bring that experience into the UX as well. So I think it really depends on the client, and also depends on the vision of that platform itself. But we like to have the optionality to do both.
Yeah, it really speaks to the flexibility of that. Great. Next question. We talked about the end user a lot here, but what would convince a residential landlord or property manager to adopt tenant experience solutions? Lukas, do you want to take this one, since you do residential as well?
So in Resi, what we see that, the technology is covering the whole tenant lifecycle, from signing the agreement to storing in the document management, then access to the community, getting your bills, ordering, the room cleaning or additional services. So it's really access to the building, working with various partners like Salto KS and so on. So in residential, I think it's much more about connecting the whole life cycle, from onboarding the tenant to the actual offboarding. And when I speak about Resi, obviously I mean the rental residential build to rent, right, where you have one institutional landlord and they are renting the space, similar like with the office, because you can really, with the technology, you can bridge the connection between landlord or the operator and the end user. Yeah, I think that answers.
Great. And then last questions, I'll combine kind of the last two. So people are asking what features are most used on your platform and what features are most asked for. So maybe if everybody wants to give their 1 or 2 top features, and we'll end it there. June, do you want to start?
No, because I don't really have like a platform, but I think, right now it would still just be like, pretty much about booking things and making sure that you have what you need when you actually get to the office.
Yeah, booking is definitely key. Tyler, how about you?
Food and beverage as well, both in the asset and around the community is a big one.
Jacqueline?
Yeah, besides food and beverage, I think a gym, so a place to work out within the building itself on the ground floor is something which is asked for, in combination with the co-working flexible work operators there, to provide that flexible part for our office companies to grow and to downgrade as well.
Last but not least, Lukas?
So for us, it's a communication, the most adopted and easy to launch, and then the shared resources or booking of amenities together with ticketing. Ticketing is working a lot for us for all the residential mixed use clients. So these 3.
Great. Well, thank you to our panelists so much, and obviously thank you to our audience as well for tuning in. It was great to chat with all of you guys, and I hope everyone learned a lot today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you, everybody.
Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.